Redneck liberal straight comedian Trae Crowder talks ignorance, homophobia, and what's wrong with the South. Trae Crowder, a known American comedian and co-author of the Liberal Redneck Manifesto, Draggin, Dixie Out of the Dark, was on Queer News Tonight. Trae Crowder, until recently, was a little-known stand-up comic with an idea for a web series. He would call it The Liberal Redneck, and he'd do liberal rants in his strong Tennessee accent while wearing a camouflage hunting cap and a cutoff t-shirt. But that was before he became a known and celebrated comedian in the country. He was at our favorite Sunshine Cathedral for his performance. He loved it, and he has a lot to say about it. Watch Trae Crowder talking about ignorance, homophobia, and what's wrong with the South in the next segment.
This is our second and follow-up interview with well-known American comedian Trae Crowder. He is best identified by an interesting comedic brand called the Liberal Redneck. Crowder grew up in rural Tennessee near the Kentucky border. He co-authored the Liberal Redneck Manifesto, Draggin Dixie Out of the Dark. He has come to Florida to perform at Sunshine Cathedral Performing Arts Center here in Fort Lauderdale. As our Hotspots magazine and Happening Out television network viewers know, Sunshine Cathedral is the world's largest queer church. Crowder is a wonderful opportunity through his humor to explore much of what we are watching in culture wars here in Florida and across the country. After all, Crowder is a Southerner with a very thick Southern accent, straight, married, has children, lives in Los Angeles, liberal, not religious, a huge LGBTQ+ community supporter, and regularly lampoons those that disagree with this unique combination of philosophy. So, of course, we thought it would be fascinating to talk to him. Trae Crowder, welcome to South Florida and Queer News Tonight.
Yeah, hey, thank you. Good to be here in person. We got the digital version, but now we're here.
Yes, I'm loving your accent. I said in the first go around, I'm from Southwest Virginia, and I had somewhat kind of an accent of yours, but I worked very hard to get rid of it, and you apparently just never decided to do that.
No, I always had a big chip on my shoulder about it because and I mean, I don't know, I may have not lost it regardless, but like I grew up in a lake town in rural Tennessee where, you know, Yankees would come down and take their boats out on the lake in the summertime. And it was very much a thing, like I'm sure it is in any tourist town, where it was like, oh, they look down on the locals. They think we're all idiots. They think whatever. So I kind of had that ingrained in my head from a very early age. And I always made really good grades and all this stuff. So I was always very defiant about like, hey, no, the way that I sound doesn't mean anything about how my brain works, you know, or whatever. So I think that's maybe why I mean, I never even entertained the notion to try to get rid of it.
Yeah,
you know?
and that's a great segue for us to start right at the top. So many unique things about you, all combined. You're like this complex stew of these different kinds of things. Many of them are contradictory. How did all of that happen? Explain to me how this of Trae Crowder developed.
I mean, I think, again, part of it was being like the smart kid in this tiny redneck town, very redneck town. Like my accent actually used to be a little bit thicker when I was growing up in Salina. And still, I got made fun of for talking proper because I just, you know, had words that had multiple syllables in them. And I, you know, maybe enunciated some of them a little better. And that was pretty much it. So, like, I was always different. And I was always very aware of that. And then as I got older and my Uncle Tim, who I'm very close to, I found out he was, like my dad explained to me that he was gay when I was like 9 or 10 years old. And then I started picking up on things I hadn't before about like how the church is there anyway, or towards gay people. And I knew that also made me different, not agreeing with any of that for a good personal reason. And I just kind of always was a little bit of, I guess, a man without a country, but I still had all these elements of somebody who grows up there. I just didn't fit in with so much of it. And it's kind of just always been that way.
Trae, that's so interesting to me because the Liberal Redneck Manifesto. I want to talk a moment about that, because when you put manifesto in a title, it's a declarative statement. Yeah. This is my manifesto, dragging Dixie out of the dark. So it's implying they're in dark ages, let's say, and I'm going to help drag them out. And it's based on stereotypes of Southerners, like you just said. It's based because I had the exact same situation, right, and I wanted more and pursued it. But in the South, we seem to be stereotyped that we don't want to do that, and that we're based in a lot of, especially rural communities, in ignorance. Was that your experience? We don't want to improve out of our ignorance?
Well, it's weird because, I mean, it was kind of my experience, but at the same time, and I didn't realize this until years after I left my hometown, apparently, from what I can tell, my hometown in Tennessee is like almost progressive by tiny Tennessee town standards. Because like my wife,
are we talking about Nashville?
No, Salina, Tennessee.
Oh, Salina.
Middle of nowhere. But like my wife is from a town called Waynesboro. I've met a bunch of friends over the years who were from equally tiny towns in Tennessee. And like the stuff they would tell me about their hometown would kind of shock me. Like, for example, like my mother-in-law told me once, and she wasn't trying to be mean, but she was just saying, she was like, oh, there's no gay people in Wayne County. She's like, we just don't have any. Yeah. And I was like, you probably do, or at a certain point they leave or whatever. Or like the racism I heard about from some of these other towns that like, I didn't really expect. I mean, there was racism there, but like when I was in high school, because we had a black community, and like saying the N-word was a good way to get whipped, you know what I mean? Like get beat up in a fight. And so it just wasn't as prevalent in that way. And also my uncle and at least two other openly gay men were like prominent business owners in the community, and like nobody was throwing bricks through their walls or nothing like that. So, or through their windows. So, I mean, it felt very stereotypical in that way, but also like comparatively, I actually think my hometown is like maybe not so bad,
not as bad
for whatever reason, you know, but I was not aware of that at the time.
You know, it's interesting when you said about your wife's county and that there are no gay people in it. The other person that I have heard make the exact same statement is Vladimir Putin about Russia.
Right.
there's no gay people in Russia either.
We just don't have any.
They
just don't exist here somehow.
Was growing up and through your experience today of the stereotype of ignorance in especially rural South, and it can lead to hate, race hate, LGBT hate, other kinds of hate. Do you see that that's commonplace, that ignorance leads to hateful situations, and that we don't want to get better? Has that been your experience?
I mean, I don't know if I want to say like no, none of us want to get any better, because the other thing I think that's worth pointing out is like the difference between the Salina that my dad, or especially my grandpa, grew up in compared to the one I grew up in is pretty stark, and in a way that's better. You know what I mean? So like, even in places like that, there's been a lot of objective progress over the years. But yes, I think the ignorance, I think the main thing with all that is that these people don't ever really meet anybody else or experiencing anything else other than, you know, what they're used to or what their lifestyle is like. And I feel like, you know, that's the number one thing that keeps people in that kind of regressive, ignorant space. You know, like ever since 9/11, you know, Muslims, they don't trust them, they're scared of them, whatever. And I bet 95% of them have literally never met an actual Muslim person.
No, that's fascinating to me. I moved to Fort Lauderdale to do this show 4 years ago. Broward County has almost 2 million residents, and one of the first phrases that I learned when I came here is Broward County is a majority-minority county, meaning black, LGBT, women, religious diversity, etc. When you have diversity, you're challenged to be better in your understanding.
Exactly, and a lot of, again, my town at least had a black community in it, but a lot of towns like mine don't even have that. So there's literally no diversity at all. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the probably number one contributing factor.
I'm curious in terms of how you get out of that. I was reading, actually I watched on MSNBC, you told The Last Words Lawrence O'Donnell, it's a very, very good show, that you attributed your liberal political views to abject poverty of your family during childhood in rural Tennessee. Explain to us what you mean that abject poverty helped create a liberal point of view of you growing up.
I mean, just to put it totally simply, like, I mean, I ate food that was, you know, acquired with food stamps my whole life growing up. And like, and also, you know, I did well in school. I went to college. I got a good job, whatever. It's like, I feel like I'm living proof that those programs do work. And so it would be very hypocritical of me to be opposed to them. And I've just always, like, you hear people talk about, oh, they're just lazy, the wealth, they just won't put their feet up and collect money from the government. And it's always bothered me because I'm like, nothing is easy or laid back about being that poor. Like, it's horrible and it's very stressful, and it's no one's like choosing that. And there might be a very small pocket of people who do that, but it's not the norm. And because I experienced it firsthand, I just always felt like that's the way, you know, you should feel about that era or that area of our politics, you know. It makes sense.
I want to also, that's interesting. And do you think more people in the rural South can get to a place of thinking more broadly like you have done?
I don't know. I mean, I wish. I mean, that's one of those things, like, because that everybody knows, like, oh, they vote against their own economic self-interest, which, I mean, they do. And with Trump, at the very least, I felt like it was a little more nuanced with that, because he was lying, but, I mean, he was making promises to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They weren't, based on what he said, they weren't really voting against their own self-interest. It's just they should have known better than to trust him on any of that.
He was really good at it.
Yeah, right. And so, you know, I think it's a little more nuanced than some people think. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people just get caught up with all the culture war stuff instead of like the practicality of, you know, the Democratic Party is supposed to be for the working man and for, you know, the regular American. And part of that's the Democratic Party's fault, I think. They've sort of lost that branding over the years.
Certainly here in Florida.
Yeah, which should be inexcusable. But, I mean, you know, it just is what it is.
Yeah. I also want to talk about the progression of your progressive social beliefs as it relates to LGBT acceptance. You've been quite a tremendous voice, especially when you hear your accent and where you're from. It's highly unusual. And you talk about the influence that your gay uncle had on you. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was raised mostly by my dad. My parents got divorced when I was 7, and I've lived with my dad pretty much the whole time after that. My dad was a single father, and he had one sibling, his younger brother, my Uncle Tim. And Uncle Tim was just always around. I mean, as long as I can remember, he was always around, not holidays, but also every Sunday for Titans games or whatever. Uncle Tim was just always there. He had this deli on the square in town, and he had all that and made all these visits with his, you know, he couldn't be married back then, his partner, Mike, Uncle Mike, right? And when I was a little kid, I never thought about what that was. And then, like I said, about 9 or 10, my dad explained to me, well, they're gay, they're in a relationship together. And immediately I was just like, okay, well, all right, that's fine. I don't care. He's still Uncle Tim and Uncle Mike, you know. And then again, as I got older living there, I realized that was a problem for a lot of people, you know what I mean? Or that was not accepted and that type of thing. And I was just always very like
defiant. They were ostracized
about
in your town?
Well, I mean, honestly, no, not really. It's not that they were ostracized. It was just one of those things where like no one acknowledged the truth of the situation. They never, it was not that they pretended. It's like everyone knew it, but no one talked about it.
Right.
And so they'd be nice to them at their face, or they'd eat at their deli or whatever. But then if you ask that person, what do you think about homosexuality? They would say it's an abomination, it's a sin, they're all burning in hell or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that was sort of how the dichotomy worked in my hometown.
And in that instance, so your uncle and his partner are relatively embraced in your small rural town.
Yes.
Why isn't the pure exposure to them enough to start to help change other people's minds?
I mean, I guess maybe on the one hand, it at least helped a little bit because, like I said, people were not overtly antagonistic toward them and whatever. And maybe in some of these other towns they would have been. I don't know. So maybe it's at least a little bit better. But I think it was just it's just so deeply ingrained. I mean, I know I'm performing at a church tonight, a queer church, but I've always really chalked a lot of that up to the church and indoctrination and how the rhetoric always was surrounding homosexuality in churches like where I grew up in places like it, you know, and it's just a lot. I mean, when it comes straight from God, they think, you know, it's a lot for them to just say no, even though, hey, I liked him, but he's a sinner.
It's a great transition into talking about church. We're going to extensively explore a story that's coming out of Jacksonville. And now Jacksonville is a major metropolitan city, but it is very rural South. And the First Baptist Church in Jacksonville has announced that all of its members are going to have to sign a sexual identity pledge to pledge that they're heterosexual and that they reject LGBTQ lifestyle. The First Baptist Church of Jacksonville, Florida. What's your reaction to what we watch in the church? Tell us about your experience and what you think about it.
I mean, really the only thing that surprised me about that at all is just that it's in a city like Jacksonville. It's still a city in northern Florida, I get that, but it's a city. And like if you told me that exact same thing, but about a First Baptist church in a town like mine, I wouldn't bat an eye. I would be like, I can't believe they didn't do that years ago, honestly. Like, because it wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, in fact, it's not exactly the same thing, but I remember one of the churches in my hometown came to my high school, and the high school totally supported this. They came to my high school, got all of the seniors together in the auditorium, and they passed out these pledges that you had to sign. It was like, I swear before God, I will not have sex before marriage. I will not imbibe alcohol. I'll not do all this stuff. And you're swearing before, and you put your name on it. And I'm not just saying this. Like, I handed it back to my principal, and I was like, I'm not going to sign that. And she was like,
what grade were you in?
I was a senior in high school. It was all the senior, because it was like, you're going into college. You're going to be tempted by sin. Swear before God you won't do any of that. And so many of my friends, and I get this too, they knew they were still going to, but they signed it anyway because, hey, I don't want any trouble. They signed it knowing they were going to break it.
I'm sure you did too. I watched the documentary on Liberty University, and you know, that's what they do now at Liberty in Lynchburg. I read that you identify as agnostic. Is that true?
Yes.
That's what you said?
Yeah.
I read a quote that was tagged with you that said, talking about your religion, I've never been particularly down with Jesus. I love that phrase. I'm not particularly down with Jesus because of the conservative social views of homosexuality held by most Christian denominations, especially in the area, meaning your town, region in Tennessee, where you were raised. Tell me about how you come to that in terms of, is it a complete rejection of all religion, or what is agnostic to you?
I'm not like hardcore atheist the way a lot of atheists are. Like, I'm not bothered by people, you know, embracing their own religion, whatever it is. They should be allowed to do it. It's just, as long as they don't then encroach upon other people's lifestyles or try to force their beliefs on other people, which I feel like so many churches in this country do. But like, if they're not doing that and they're just following their own doctrine that's highly spiritual to them and they feel a connection with God and all that, then I mean, that's totally fine with me. It doesn't bother me at all. I'm not hardcore like, oh, all religion needs to be abolished or whatever. It's just that in my experience, there's a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of things that don't really make any sense. Like with my gay uncle, and so with homosexuality issues related to the church, that was sort of the first thing that made me think, well, I don't really understand what that's about. And I feel like that sort of opened a door into me questioning a lot of other things about the religion or the doctrine or the Bible that I started noticing also didn't make sense to me. And it just kind of went on from there.
And it's part of this contradiction thing that I think is so fascinating with you. You said in our first interview, when we were talking about your gig at Sunshine, you said you've never performed at a church before.
No.
And while this is Sunshine Performing Arts Center, this event that you're performing at is a sellout. But after all, it is a church performing art, and it is a gay church,
right? Which
is like contradiction.
Yeah.
You are third contradiction.
Yeah.
Thoughts about agnostic Southerner with a thick Southern accent who is a redneck performing in a church and a queer church?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild. Like, I'll probably talk about this at least a little bit on stage later, but like when my agent first says like, hey, there's we got an offer for you to do a show at a church in Florida. And I was like, is this a trap? Like, I don't know about that. And he's like, no, it's the world's largest queer church. And I was like, okay, well, that certainly makes it different, but I still have some questions. Just the church part, the gay part, no problem at all.
Yeah.
All for it.
Yeah.
The church part, I was like, are they sure? But I'm not going to get up there, and I don't do this anywhere. Like, I might take a couple of jabs, but like, I'm not, again, because I'm not that sort of fervent atheist type. Like, I don't spend a lot of time going after the church, really. It's just that I have been open about not sharing the beliefs. So, I mean, yeah, the whole thing. I mean, I'm anxious to see, how it goes. I'm sure it'll be fun.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I'm looking forward to it myself. I've looked at a lot of your programs in YouTube. You're quite a YouTube celebrity. I read today you've got nearly 20 million cumulative views in YouTube now. I'm curious with the brand that you represent, Southern accent, agnostic, which is not anti-religious, liberal, redneck. You kind of sit in the hate sphere on both sides.
Yes.
What's that experience like in YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, at this point, I don't get near as much hate as I used to when I first came onto the scene and went viral. There were a lot of people. I mean, I got a lot of hateful messages back then, and I'll still get some. But I think at a certain point, those people knew who I was and just didn't bother with watching my videos anymore or whatever. But it's like I said earlier, the man without a country thing has kind of been the story of my life. Like, I'm definitely, like, people would think, oh, he's a liberal, so people in the South don't like that. Oh, he's a redneck, so people on the coast don't like that. So who does like this guy?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there,
your shows are selling out.
Yeah, so there's a
lot of people that are liking
appeal to it. Yeah, exactly. But I can understand how at face value someone might think this dude is for no one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not true.
I also want to ask you about the thing that I just briefly explored the first time we talked. Then you up and move to Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And to me, that is one of the greatest contradictions, because your accent in Los Angeles, I frankly, I have never talked to anyone in Southern California that has as deep a Southern accent as you have. What's that reaction to you like?
Well, it's funny because, yes, I will meet people who hear me talk, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from Tennessee. And they're like, oh, I'm from Tennessee too. But they have no accent at all. So I'll meet other people from the South. Right. I never meet anyone who actually sounds like me.
Right.
And honestly, the most common reaction it gets really just from day-to-day people at, the clerk, the cashier at CVS, or the Uber driver or whatever, is that people think it's fake, or they're skeptical of it, not in a distrusting way. And I don't know if it's because it's Hollywood and they think, oh, maybe he's an actor who's, getting ready for an audition as a possum wrangler or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's what it is, but typically, and they'll be nice about it. They'll say I really like that accent if it's real, if that's your real accent. And I'm like, yeah, it is. And then they're like, oh, well, that's cool. Yeah. People aren't usually.
Do you get rejection?
I mean, no one just says, oh, I don't trust you because of the way you talk. But you could tell that there are people who are like, yeah, I don't really want anything to do with this guy.
And the reason I ask you that is we have a gigantic advocate, not only in Nancy Pelosi, when she was House Speaker, but in Governor Newsom. And he's a gigantic supporter of LGBTQ community. And he calls out the South frequently, over and over and over, and Governor DeSantis here in Florida. And I'm wondering if that attitude in some ways might adversely affect you, of going, well, we're lumping you into the hate that we know goes on down from the region you're from.
Oh, I mean, I feel it for sure. And I think, like, sometimes I'll get the impression from somebody that, like, but of course, I'm reading into things. Again, it's not like they explicitly tell me this, but I get the distinct impression from some people that it's like, it's not really a thing they can move past. Do you know what I mean? Like, they hear the accent, they think whatever, and then it almost doesn't matter what I say after that or what I do. You know what I mean? They're just not going to be down with it because I'm just not down with that type of thing, they think. And I definitely think that's real.
That's funny. Man without a country seems to be a right definition.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your politics. During pandemic, and I've looked at some of it now, you did a show broadcast on Facebook Live called The Evening Skews with a co-host, Mark Agee. Agee.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was most interesting to me is a lot of comedians don't focus on the politics as much. You had no issue with that. You just dived right into...
Well, I mean, look, my videos, the things that most people know me for, are political in nature. You know, that's the thing that put me on the spot in the first place. And so because of that, I felt like it made sense to have a podcast that was overtly political. But I also, like, I have other podcasts and things that I do that, like, I like to do both. Like, I have a show with one of the guys I tour with, Corey Forrester, where it's called Putting on Airs, and we just talk about fancy people stuff, and it's not political at all.
Fancy people.
It's two hillbillies talking about fancy people stuff, right? And there's no politics, but it's funny, and we have a good time with it. But yeah, because of the nature of how I became known in the first place, I don't have any problem, like, shying away from politics.
And doing that Facebook Live and that political podcast, as you call it. We've gotten through pandemic. You know, I don't know. You're here in Florida. The pandemic never happened here. COVID never existed here in Florida. We were very, very lucky. It never came here. It just literally would not cross the border.
Tell you what, who did come here, though? A lot of people who were really into that fact. You know what I mean? I feel like that was part of. I feel like Florida was already shifting. Because Florida was a swing state forever, like one of the biggest ones. Them and Ohio both, everybody knew it. And then they've been gradually shifting further to the right. And I feel like COVID was the final, just like the final strike that really solidified that.
And we reported in 2022, we became the fastest growing state in the nation. And it was mostly because of relocation from other places that thought, well, you know, there's where the crazy's going.
Exactly. So and I'm crazy, so let's go.
Let's go. Exactly. All right. Well, we finished pandemic. Never happened here, but we finished pandemic. You excited about where you're going in terms of what's next for you? All of that's behind us. You're out and about traveling and doing shows.
I mean the tour's been going great response, and I'm in the process of building like a new hour of material. So a lot of stuff I'm doing is like new or newer, and it's still been going well, and it's just exciting as a comedian doing all of that. And then I've also got my podcast, which are fun, and then I have some, you know, TV development things I'm trying to get going, but I've been doing that for the past 6 years, and that's a really tough nut to crack, but I'm keep on pushing that boulder.
That's why you're in Los Angeles?
Yes, exactly. For a while, if you're a comedian, and you want to be serious about it, you had to either live in New York or Los Angeles. And I'm from the South, so just weather alone, it was LA the whole time. Ever since COVID, that's a little less true, but you know, I've been out there and I like it, so we'll see.
I want to ask you about what you represent. You know, you're a redneck, and all of that series of jokes and comedian and other like comedians. Frequently very, very funny. What's interesting to me is you kind of have that same branding perspective, but you are so pro LGBT, vigorously talk about it. He did not. And I'm curious because I want to ask you about the seat you represent. Many LGBT will watch this. They'll come to your shows because they get interested in what you say and try to understand why you've been able to accomplish it when others haven't. It comes down to you have so much of what we call white male privilege. Mm-hmm. You know, I have it in white gay male privilege as being gay, meaning you're straight, you're male, and you're in a cohort that launches much of the culture war attack on LGBT, frankly, like what we're watching from our governor here in Florida and so many more. But you break every one of the results of that white gay privilege. Why don't more people get to the place of where you're at?
I mean, I think it circles back to one of the first things we talked about with like the importance of diversity and exposure. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people just don't have that. And then some people do. They have a beloved family member come out as gay and they kick them out and disown them or whatever. But I just can't understand the lack of humanity required to do something like that. But apparently some people have it, but I don't. And it's just a thing that I never questioned for a second, you know, because of the nature of my relationship with my uncle and him being gay and all that. It was never anything that I struggled with, you know, so it's hard for me to say.
You have children, how old?
10 and 11, boys, two of them.
Both of them boys. Yeah. Have you thought about the chance of either one of them identifying as gay?
Yeah, I have thought about it. In fact, it's old. It's on our comedy album that we did, me, Corey, and Drew, but I had a bit about, and obviously this is just a comedy bit, I'm kidding around, but I was talking about how serious college football is in the South, and I'm from Tennessee, and the whole bit is like, I would so much prefer one of my sons be gay than be an Alabama fan.
That's right. Right.
And that was the whole point of it.
Right.
And I thought it was funny, and I already recorded it and put it out, but we did a show at a gay nudist resort. Right. Right. 2 of them actually, and the first time I did that bit, and some of those guys came up to me afterwards, and they weren't admonishing me, they weren't being, you know, like antagonistic about it, but they came up to me and they were like, you know, they basically said, you know, why would you want one of your sons to be gay? Like, do you realize how, and it like really affected me, because obviously I've thought about that before.
This is coming from a gay man.
Yeah, right. Multiple of them, you know, they were like, look, it's not easy. It's not fun, you know, whatever. And again, I'm aware of that, but at the same time, I am a straight white dude, so I'm not really, like, I think I'm aware of it, but I'm really not. And so, yeah, that sort of reframed the way that I looked at it as far as being so cavalier and irreverent about the whole thing, the way that I was before. Yeah. But, I mean, if one of my sons is gay, like, you know, bring it on. Yeah. I mean, that's totally fine with me, more than fine. Like, it wouldn't really impact me at all one way or another. It's like, you know, it's not like I can throw him back or nothing. You know, he's not a small mouth.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. Well, all the best to your family and to you. I'm looking forward to seeing your gig. Welcome to South Florida. We're really happy that you're here. You understand how unusual you are in the LGBTQ community. I do, I can't completely tell that you recognize that.
I know.
We have talked about you since the announcement that Sunshine did the gig booking. It's like bringing a unicorn into the church.
Yeah, I've gotten that a lot, actually. But I'm not the only one. There are more of us. We do exist. Yeah. We might be a minority, an extreme minority, but we're out there. Yeah. It's not just me.
Excellent. Well, you want to follow Trae Crowder, and we're putting up all of the contact information. And what's next for you?
Keeping going on the tour. I've got, if you go to TraeCrowder.com, maybe I'm coming near you, wherever you're at, and you can come check it out, because I got a bunch of dates coming up.
Yeah, I highly recommend that you do that. Trae Crowder, thank you very much for coming to Queer News tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out television network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. like this broadcast, and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ+ community.